Alright, hey guys, I asked if y'all wanted me to make a video of this past week's Bible study for those of you who couldn't make it. Sorry I'm just now getting the time to sit down and do it. This is actually sooner than I thought it would be. I had 10 hours clinical yesterday, got to come home and do paperwork and all that stuff, and I got out of class early today, so I'm going to see if I can get this knocked out for y'all. So Tuesday, we basically went through Proverbs 3 and 4. Let me get myself situated here. And it was a lot about wisdom's benefits. So that's what we're going to kind of run through here. Let me get my Bible open and everything. So just diving right on in with the first 10 verses of Proverbs. We are given 5 different commands, and there's a reward that comes with that command. And so these are just things, kind of it has to do in all with trusting the Lord. So I'm going to read those verses and we'll go through and tell y'all just kind of what those commands and rewards are, and maybe why they're important, and just give y'all a little bit of discussion and kind of what we talked about. So starting in chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "My child, never forget the things I've taught you. Store my commands in your heart. If you do this, you will live many years, and your life will be satisfying. Never let loyalty and kindness leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Write them deep within your heart. Then you will find favor with both God and people, and you will earn a good reputation. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not be dependent on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do, and He will show you which path to take. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then He will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine." And that was the NLT version. So the first command that we have comes from verse 1, and it says to store my commands in your heart. And it says that if we store the Lord's commands in our heart, we will live many years and our life will be satisfying. So the kind of question that just kind of came to my mind when we were talking about this is, so what does this tell us about the importance of God's Word? So God's Word, a lot of the times as Christians, we just kind of, like, we're known to store it in our heart, and that's what we're told to do. That way we have Scripture that we can bring to mind whenever we're facing spiritual warfare and that stuff. And I think it's just, that just tells you the importance that we're supposed to store those commands in order to live many years and have a satisfying life, because that all comes from the Lord. And I think in order for us to have a satisfying life and to be on the path of wisdom, we have to know God's Word and be able to store it in our heart to have as a reference to keep pursuing. So the second command comes from verse 3. It says, "Never let loyalty and kindness leave you." So I think loyalty and kindness can kind of be interchanged with different things. I think it can be interchanged with faithfulness and honesty and love, really, is what it all boils down to. And the reward for that is that we have a good reputation. So really kind of what we discussed about this command and reward is that what are the world's requirements for us to have a good reputation compared to God's. And so I find it really interesting in here that it talks about loyalty and kindness, but that all boils down to love. And when we love others and we love God, we gain that good reputation. Whereas a lot of times in the world, the people who have the good reputation or the popular reputation are those who don't possess those things. And really what it just kind of boils down to is don't be two-faced. It's kind of, I guess, the really blunt way to put it. We don't want to live one life and say one thing, but then go behind somebody's back and do something else. We want to bestow that trust and that loyalty to people here, because in order for us to do that and to have that relationship with God and to build those Christian-like relationships and just to be witnesses to them, we have to establish that trust and loyalty, but we also have to remain loyal and kind to God through all of that. The third command is trust. It comes from verse 5, and it's going to say, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not depend on your own understanding." And then the next verse says, "Seek Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. And so we're called to trust the Lord. And when we trust the Lord, he gives us that direction to figure out where we need to go in life. And a lot of the times we struggle with this. And so my question for you is, why do we struggle with this? I think a lot of the times it's because we fail to find people in the world that we can trust. But we have to remember that our God is a sovereign God. He's a faithful God. He's a loving God. And we can trust him no matter what. The next command comes from verse 7. It says, do not be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. So we kind of broke this verse down a lot. We had a good conversation about this. Out of that verse, I got be humble and fear the Lord. But then it also says to turn away from evil. And so the reward that comes with that is strength and healing. And so I thought it was really unique because we talked about, well, what kind of strength and healing? Is this physical strength? Is it mental strength, emotional strength? And really what I think it comes down to is, so if we are not impressed with our own wisdom, so we're humble and still continue to seek the wisdom and knowledge of other people, it takes away and it brings us that like that mental healing to be humble, but to also seek other. So it destroys pride. We don't have pride when we aren't impressed by what we know, but like we're still willing to seek other people. And then so I think that kind of has to do with like a mental or a spiritual healing. But I also think it gives us physical strength, because when we turn away from evil, when we choose the path of evil, there are so many different ways and things and roads that we can trail down. So like if we're following evil, we may get into a fight, or we may, I don't know, maybe we do something that's on the path of evil, we make a mistake, we commit a sin, it causes us to get in a car wreck, or just do something stupid, but like it causes us to be hurt physically. And so I think just by pursuing the ways of wisdom and seeking wisdom benefits us, because when we seek out others' opinions and different ways of doing things, we're not going down that path per se. Sorry, that was like really, really poorly explained. That might not make any sense. Y'all can talk to me if y'all want to about that. And then the last one comes from verse 9 and 10. It says, honor the Lord with your wealth. And then the reward for that is going to be he will replenish you. And so I think a lot of times as college students, we get really tied up in the fact that the only way that like we can give to God is I have to give God my money. And yes, we are called to tithe. So I'm not going to sit here and say that we don't tithe, or that being in college is ever an excuse for not giving the Lord our money and giving the Lord what he has blessed us with. But when we were reading, another translation said, honor the Lord with your possessions, which is really awesome, because where I wanted to go with this and just the point and how it convicted me was our possessions are so much more than just wealth. They're so much more than things. They're so much more than money. We possess time. We can give our time to God. We can be serving him in that way. We can give our love to other people because we possess love, because he gives us love. We have the possession of grace, which comes from God, and we can give that to other people when they do us wrong, grace and mercy. But it's so important to remember that when we're working for the Lord and we're doing those things for the Lord, he's going to give back to us everything that we've given to him. So moving on, I'm going to read y'all verse 11 and 12, and then we're going to talk about what God's discipline has to do with wisdom. So verses 11 and 12 are, my child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects the child in whom he delights. And so I think it's really important that we remember that God's discipline is because he loves us. He doesn't do it because he doesn't do it out of a desire to hurt us or to harm us, but he does it because he loves us. And I also think it's really interesting because we look at discipline physically here on earth, how a father disciplines their child. That father may spank their child, they may get grounded. If you grew up in my house and you were stubborn like I was, you got to do wall sits for your discipline and punishment. Was not a fun experience. But I think it's interesting just to think about, like, what does God's discipline look like? What does it look like for God to discipline us? So that's just kind of a thought for y'all to take and chew on. So the next question I have on here is, why is wisdom worth more than silver, gold, and rubies? And so I'm going to read y'all verses 14 through 18. And it says, whoops, my bad, guys. For wisdom is more profitable than silver, and her wages are better than gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. She offers you long life in her right hand, and riches and honor in her left. She will guide you down delightful paths. All her ways are satisfying. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Happy are those who hold her tightly. So these verses made me think a lot back on there are some verses in Matthew, I believe, that talk about where we store our treasure. And we are taught in the parables that we are not supposed to store our treasures on earth, but that we're supposed to store them in heaven. And I think this is a really beautiful example about wisdom, because when we seek wisdom, we're growing closer to God. But also, my version says wisdom is a tree of life, and that she gives us happiness. And I think it's just a great reminder that we can't continue to try and seek happiness here on earth. One example that kind of got brought up during Bible study was, it's like if you go to a party and you're like, oh, everybody else is having a drink, so I'm just going to get one drink. But you're not satisfied after that one drink, so you keep drinking and you keep drinking and you keep drinking, and eventually you find yourself drunk and you're never satisfied. And I think it's really important to remember that silver, gold, and rubies in all of the earthly possessions will never get us the satisfaction and the joy that we can get from the Lord. And one of those ways that we can pursue and find that is by developing a relationship and path of wisdom and seeking her. So this was something else that was really neat to me. I'm going to read y'all verses 19 and 20, and it says, by wisdom the Lord founded the earth, by understanding he created the heavens. By his knowledge the deep foundations of the earth burst forth, and the dew settles beneath the sky. So when I first read this, I kind of interpreted this as God needed wisdom to create the earth. But after we talked about this, I just kind of learned from some other people's perspectives that God chose to have wisdom. This is 100% probably not biblically accurate, but a way that I kind of looked at it, and it might help you kind of picture this in your mind. If God had chosen a wife, or if God was married and had a wife, I think his wife would have been wisdom. But it's just really a beautiful picture because he chose to use wisdom. So one, that kind of screams to me a little. It's like, if God chose to use wisdom and chose to have wisdom, why should I not? But just another thing, it makes me think about how in the story of creation, God created Adam, but he also gave him Eve to be a life partner and a companion and a helper. And so it kind of, in my opinion, in the way that I see it, kind of sort of replicates it in the right word, but it just gives another example of that benefit that we get from pursuing relationships, and just that we aren't called to go through life completely on our own. God is there for us to choose him and to pursue him and to pursue wisdom and knowledge and just all that and strength that we need to grow closer to him. So the next little bit that we're going to look at is Proverbs 3:27 through 32. And it says, do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it's in your power to help them. You can go back to your neighbor. If you can help your neighbor now, don't say, come back tomorrow and then I'll help you. Don't plot harm against your neighbor, for those who live nearby trust you. Don't pick a fight without reason when no one has done you harm. Don't envy violent people or copy their ways. Such wicked people are detestable to the Lord, and he offers friendship to the godly. So the question that I have here for us is, what character traits does Solomon tell us to avoid through this scripture? There's a lot that stood out to me, but one in particular that stood out to me that I know all of us as college students struggle with is procrastination. So it says, if you can help your neighbor now, don't wait. Don't say, come back tomorrow, then I'll help you. Do it now. And so this has been a really convicting verse for me, just because when I read through the book of Proverbs over this summer, I underlined this verse and I said, don't procrastinate because God doesn't like laziness. But I also think there's a lot of ways in our Christian lives that we procrastinate and put off God in that time with Him. I know for me, one of the things that I struggle with is getting up every day or even spending time every day in the Word. That is a challenge for me, a lot more days than it should be. But one way that it really convicted me is, how often do we run into a person on the sidewalk, we say, hey, how are you? And we just move on. Or how often do we sit down and have a conversation with somebody and just fellowship in one another, and let's say they're having a hard time and you're having a hard time, and before y'all leave, you're like, well, I'll be praying for you. How many times do we say, I'll pray for you, but then we never do because we forget, or we'll put it off. We'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to put off prayer. I don't have time to do it right now, so I'm going to do it later. And then eventually we never do. And so that kind of ties into the verse about not plotting harm against your neighbor because those who live nearby you trust you. We as fellow believers trust each other. And so if someone tells me that they're going to pray for me, then in my mind, I'm like, okay, this person's going to pray for me. But in a way, we betray that person when we don't pray for them. So I just want to encourage you, if you get the opportunity, to stop and pray with somebody instead of saying, oh, I'll pray for you later. So some other ones that stood out to me is stinginess. It says, do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it's in your power to help them. Evil, we don't want to plot evil or harm. Jealousy, don't envy violent people or copy their ways. And then selfishness and pride were in there as well. Don't pick a fight without reason. Don't be prideful and just pick a fight to pick a fight because you don't agree with somebody's opinion. So, and so the next question is, so if this is how we're not supposed to be, how does Solomon say we should be? And so basically we want to be the opposite of that. We want to be diligent workers. We want to be hardworking. We want to be generous. We want to be kind. We want to be loving. We want to be humble. We want to be full of humility. We want to be content. We want to be selflessness. So just kind of there's definitely a big distinguish between those who seek wisdom and are pursuing the characteristics and the qualities to be more like Jesus. God is calling us, as Michelle put it, we like to call the Southern Gospel by Michelle. She said, he's saying be Jesus. So be Jesus. So the next question is, what gives us a strong incentive to choose the right path of life? And that's going to come from verses 33 through 35. And it says, the Lord curses the house of the wicked, but he blesses the house of the upright. The Lord mocks the mockers, but is gracious to the humble. The wise inherit honor, but fools are put to shame. So the three things that I kind of got out of this are, we get blessings, we get grace, and we get honor. And really, when we were having this conversation, a lot of people were saying, so those are just like three basic things that we get, even though there's so much more. But we go on to the next question as we go into Proverbs 4, and I have, so why should we as Christians pursue a relationship with wisdom? How do we go about pursuing a relationship with wisdom? And what are the benefits of a relationship with wisdom? And those are kind of just some things for y'all to chew on. The specific verses that are going to go with that from the book that I'm using is Proverbs 6 and then 8 and 9. But the question the question that really just came up is, out of all these things that we just talked about, the rewards that we get from the simple commands, the blessings, the grace, the joy that we get from wisdom, the happiness, why would, if, and like the fact that, just even the fact that God needed, and not needed, that God used wisdom, so why would I not pursue that is a better question. So that's just kind of some things for y'all to chew on. So how would you go about pursuing a relationship with wisdom? The next question, there's a passage in chapter 4. It's going to be verses 10 through 19, and it compares the ways of wisdom versus the ways of wickedness. I'm not going to read it just because it's so long, but I'm going to hit the high points. So with the way, we're going to talk about wisdom first. So in this passage, it talks about how the way of wisdom is lit up. I'll read a few verses. It says, I will teach you wisdom's ways and lead you in straight paths. When you walk, you won't be held back. When you run, you won't stumble. Take hold of my instruction and don't let them go. Guard them, for they are the key of life. And so I read this verse a few years ago, this passage, and one of the things that I wrote in my Bible on a sticky note says, God's path allows me to run wild and free. And so when we're on God's path, y'all, the ways and just seeking his will, it is limitless what he will allow us to do and just the doors that he will open if we continue to pursue him, because he's going to close doors and he's going to open doors. He's going to close one door after another, but he's going to keep opening them the further you pursue him and the further you seek him in all you do. And I think it's just really awesome to like look at and realize that the ways of the path of wisdom and the way of life, there is no limit. God opens doors and he closes them too, and that's how we get to more open doors. But as long as we pursue him, we can find so much in life, and there's always going to be a light. But when we look at the wickedness side, there's violence, there's restlessness, there's no satisfaction, and there's darkness. One of the verses says, it says, for evil people can't sleep until they've done their evil deed for the day. They can't rest until they've caused someone to stumble. The way of the wicked is like total darkness. They have no idea what they're stumbling over. And then the verse before that, just kind of going back to show you where the light came from, it says, the way of wisdom is like the first gleam of dawn, which shines brighter until the light of day is full. So just there's very much a difference. If you want or feel like you're struggling with seeking God or being able to know where you're supposed to go, I encourage you to pray about that. Not that anyone is necessarily going down the path of wickedness, but just if you're just going, or you're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to major in, seriously pray about it, because God is going to take you down an obstacle. And it's going to be an obstacle whether it's the way of wisdom or the way of evil men or the wickedness. So I just strongly encourage you to really pray and spend time in the Word with him and see what he calls you and leads you to do, because he's going to get you there one way or another, and there's going to be obstacles. But just remember that if you're seeking him and pursuing him and truly trying to listen for your calling, he's going to shine a light, and there's going to be doors that he closes, but he's also going to open doors just to get you where you're going. So the last little bit of this is kind of random, but it's here. So at the very end, it's going to be verses 23 through 27. God talks about, Solomon, the book of Proverbs, it talks about how wisdom brings health to a person's body. And so we're going to look at the heart, the mouth, and the lips, the eyes, and the feet. So the heart, verse 23, it says, guard your heart above all else, because it determines the course of your life. And this kind of stood out to me because the phrase or quote that I thought of that we hear all the time is follow your heart. So if we are not pursuing wisdom and we're not pursuing God, we're just pursuing the world. Arms wide open, running at the world, just we don't have anything holding us back, but we've also got nothing helping us, and we're following our heart. We're not filling our heart to be, we're not allowing our heart to be spiritually filled and spiritually fed and led by God. And so I think it's just really important that we're mindful of the things that we spend our time looking at visually, whether it's a TV show or the things coming in our ears, just because we want our heart to be following those things. I'll kind of give you all a little bit of an example from my life. So as anybody who has known me for probably 2 years now, All of ministry team knows this. I have had a slight obsession with The Bachelor and The Bachelorette. But as I prayed about it and we went on our ministry team retreat, one of the things that just really I felt God saying to me was, why are you investing your time in something that does not possess the same values that you have as a Christian? And so for me, one of the ways that I've been allowing my heart to gain more spiritual wisdom and to just grow in my walk with Christ and my relationship with my boyfriend is I'm not allowing myself to fill myself and feed myself those toxic things that have no value to me as a Christian. So just different things. I know of another person who stopped listening to certain music just because all the lyrics were cursing and sexual content and drinking, and just we have to be really mindful of what we fill our body with through our senses, because we want our hearts to be filled with wisdom and in a good place so that we can stay spiritually healthy. So the mouth and the lips is going to be verse 24. It says, avoid all perverse talk and stay away from corrupt speech. And so what really stood out to me is, so we want to avoid corrupt speech. And I am so guilty of this, probably just like any other girl, definitely. We like to gossip. We like to talk about this teacher, we like to talk about this professor and say how that wasn't fair and how they did this and they did that, or that one person in the group project who just doesn't do their part. We like to gossip and we like to talk negative about people. And I think a big part of having a wisdom-filled mouth and lips is we want to focus on what we say. A lot of people say the tongue is the most powerful muscle in the body. I would beg to argue and differ and say that's the heart. Yes, that's a tangent, but we're not going to go there. Sorry guys, that was a little rabbit. But it's almost kind of has to do with like pessimism and optimism. We would much rather sit here and have the glass full and be able to see and say the positive things rather than sitting and complaining. And this is something I'm so guilty of. You ask any person who knows me well enough, I'm going to find something to complain about. I'm going to find something to worry about. But we have to focus on sharing and saying those things. Like maybe we give somebody a compliment, or somebody's having a bad day and says, oh, this is going wrong. Be like, well, the sun's shining. Just find something positive. That way you're pouring out positivity. The next one is the eyes, which is going to be verse 25. And it says, look straight ahead and fix your eyes on what lies before you. So this is something that I've personally struggled with in the past, and it's keeping my eyes focused on God. And the best analogy that I can give you is, so in life, we have this plate in college, and we have things that go on our plate. So we have school, here, and class here, homework, work, we might have a social club or sorority. You might be involved with the campus ministry. You might have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, a relationship, all that stuff. So we have this plate, and we stand right in the middle of the plate. I really wish I had another hand right now, but we're going to stand right here in the middle of the plate. So and we'll say we have God over here, just way out here. So if I'm standing here and I'm looking this way, So if God's over here and I'm facing this way, say I'm up here looking at my homework, I can't see God because I'm focused on school, because I have God over here on the side. So I can't see him. If I look this way, see, all I can see is my boyfriend. Or if I look this way, all I can see is my job. Or if I look that way, all I can see is a campus ministry or a social club or whatever you're involved in. That's what happens when God's over here. But when we take God and we fold him over into the center, and we have him in the center, and he's with us, and we're turning and looking at all these different directions, we have God with us. So we can't just put God over here and grab him when we want him. That's not how a relationship with God is supposed to work. We have to take him and put him in the center of our life. And when he's in the center of our life, we can see him in every direction. We can see him when we turn around. So my biggest encouragement for you, especially about the eyes, is to make sure no matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing, that you can see God somewhere and somehow. Take him with you and invite him into all aspects of your life. That is one of the hardest prayers to pray and the hardest places to get to, because it's a very long journey. But once you get there and you have God in all areas and aspects of your life, it's one of the most rewarding things. And so lastly is the feet, and it says, it's going to be verse 26 and 27. Mark out a straight path for your feet. Stay on the safe path. Don't get sidetracked, and keep your feet from following evil. So my big thing here, it kind of goes back to procrastination and distractions, and it all leads back to the eyes as well, and having Jesus as the center, is we can't get sidetracked. We can't, in order to stay like on the path, say like we're here walking with Jesus, but we're going to turn that way and swerve. Then he's going to swerve us back. If we have Christ with us, he's going to swerve us back. But we're going. We're doing really good on the path for Jesus in school and everything we're supposed to be doing. And then we get distracted by this little sparkly over here and we go that way. But if we have God in the center, he's always going to bring us back. And so we want to be able to have feet that follow our eyes, that are focused on Jesus, so that we can keep going. I know a lot of this was really random. I've never made a video like this, so I hope it wasn't too bad, and I hope y'all got somewhat of what we talked about. If y'all have any questions, please let me know. I'm going to send pictures of the sheets in the group me, as well as the link to the video, so that y'all have it. And if anybody wants me to email them a copy, y'all be able to, I can do that as well. So I can't wait to see y'all next Monday. Also, your challenge for this coming week is to read Proverbs 5 through 9. That's what we're going to be going over. It's about a proverb a day. We're just going to run straight through it. I'm really excited about it. The book told me it kind of skips everything else in those chapters that I'm going through, so we're going to run through it in a week. So y'all let me know if y'all have any questions, and let me know how I can pray for y'all. Thanks.